This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you into another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before we get started here today, I want to make sure I remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast, just so you make sure you never miss an episode. If you like what you hear today and you like what you've heard from the past, give us a like, give us a 5-star rating and review it. It's really helpful for us. It helps us get better and helps to make sure we continue to put out dope content for you guys week in and week out. And speaking of weeks, we're down to 1 week left in the NFL season. I can't believe it. The time's really flown by, but week 16 concluded here today with the Chiefs and the Bears. The Chiefs were able to get the dub. And this weekend, there were some very, very, very important games in terms of playoff positioning, playoff seeding, getting into the playoffs, knocking people out of the playoffs, and none of those games were more important than the Cowboys-Eagles game from earlier today. I mean, this game was billed as arguably the game of the week, and in my opinion, it was a game of the week just based on the implication of this game. I mean, if the Cowboys were able to win, they were able to lock up the NFC East. They could have rested their starters next week, got everybody healthy for the first round of the playoffs. And from the Eagles' perspective, they needed this game to keep their season alive. I mean, like I said, if they lost, then the Cowboys win the division. Next week's game against the Giants has no importance to them, other than, I guess, just to try to win and close out the season. But in terms of that, the Eagles were able to get the job done. I mean, I know a lot of people coming to the week were wondering how they were going to be able to do it. I mean, they're banged up everywhere on offense. They're without their top 3 receivers. Their quote-unquote starting running back in Jordan Howard didn't play and hasn't played for weeks. Lane Johnson, their starting right tackle and one of the best right tackles in the league, was out again this week. And they were able to do just enough on offense to find a way to pull it out. I mean, Carson Wentz, even without some of those weapons, was great today. 31 of 40, 300 plus yards, a touchdown, no turnovers. I mean, you can't, under the circumstances, it's hard to ask for much more from the quarterback. Obviously, they would have liked to ended a few more points with touchdowns as opposed to attempted field goals or punts, from that matter. But in terms of just finding a way to do enough on offense to get the lead, hold the lead, and get the win, I mean, there's not really much more you can ask from him. And then on the flip side of it, their defense, as shaky as they've been throughout the season, they stepped up when they needed them most. I mean, the defense has obviously played a little bit better at home, but even that, coming into this week, people were wondering how they were going to be able to keep up with the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys have one of the best offenses in the league. Dak is second in receiving yards. I mean, not receiving, or passing yards. They have 2 1,000-yard receivers. They have a guy in Zeke Elliott who's one of the best running backs in the league, maybe the best, depending on who you ask. And they were able to find a way to force them to just field goals. I mean, they were able to just force them to never really get their offense going. I mean, the Eagles started off hot, got the quick 10-0 lead. The crowd was rocking it, the defense was rocking, everybody was rocking, and then even as the Cowboys continued to hang around, they would just force them to kick field goals. And I mean, there's not really much more you can ask for from the defense. Again, and even they had to deal with their own injuries. Ronald Darby, starting corner, went out early in the game. The Jalen Mills missed some time. They had Fletcher Cox come in and out of the lineup here. I know he missed a little bit of time in the start of the second half, and they were still able to get the job done against an offense who, on paper, you would say they probably couldn't match up against. But, I mean, these division games, these playoff atmosphere type of games, in those instances, certain teams rise to the occasion, certain players rise to the occasion, and certain ones don't. And that Eagles defense definitely rose to the occasion. I mean, if you would have told anybody before the game started they would hold the Cowboys to 9 points and no touchdowns, I guarantee you few people would have believed that was going to be the case. But that's exactly how it went down today, and they deserve their own fair share of credit. And even in the points they did give up, 6 of those points, 2 of the field goals were off of missed field goals from Jake Elliott, like long missed field goals from Jake Elliott. So you could even say that when the Cowboys had to go and sustain drives from further distances, I mean, the Eagles really didn't let them do anything. I mean, and even then at the end, I mean, they kind of let them drive, but they were able to buckle down on fourth and 8. They were able to force the pass breakup on the attempted pass to Gallup, and then they were just able to run the clock out, and they got it done. I mean, that was, I don't want to say surprising, because it was possible. The Cowboys are just as inconsistent as the Eagles has been this season, and obviously, again, they were at home, and that plays a big difference in terms of how teams were going to go. But it's a great performance. Obviously, they're not done yet. They still have to beat the Giants next week to officially win the division. But for all intents and purposes, and for many people's belief that this was quote unquote for the NFC East, I mean, the Eagles came out, did what they had to do, and got the job done. And I mean, there's not really much more you could ask for from their perspective. And I mean, they weren't the only team to come out there and do a great job and lock up and then try to lock up playoff positioning, as the Ravens earlier today were able to beat up on the Browns a little bit. I mean, the game started off a little shaky for the Ravens at first. The Browns had this early 6-0 lead, but then the Ravens kind of were able to get a couple touchdowns there late in this first half, and then they kind of just never really looked back. I mean, the second half they were just able to continue to pile it on, and were able to beat the Browns pretty comfortably in order to lock up the 1 seed, that's going to be huge for them. I mean, with the quarterback as young as Lamar is, only in his second year, I understand he's playing great. He's going to win the MVP, all that fun stuff. But if you can, you want to make sure you play all your playoff games at home. I mean, everyone knows that kind of home field advantage is big, and like I said, especially for a young quarterback, just having the home atmosphere, the home fans, the home crowd, have them behind you. And it's just great for Lamar, because I know he had his struggles last year in the playoffs, to be able to get back into the playoffs again this year and do it, to be able to where if you do what you're supposed to do, you will have 2 home playoff games for a chance to get to the Super Bowl. And I mean, when teams come into the season, that's the best case scenario. That's all you want. That's all you ask for. Every team comes in, you want to win your division first, and you want to try to lock up a first round bye if you can. And if you can get that, you want to get home field advantage. You want to make sure everybody has to come to you, and that's what the Ravens were able to do today. And that's going to be important, just because because right now the Patriots are 2 seed, and no one wants to have to go to Foxborough. Even though the Patriots have looked a little bit vulnerable this season. And obviously the Ravens beat them this year, but that was in Baltimore. So, like I said, that's why the home field advantage is important. If you get the Ravens to have to come to you get the Chiefs to have to come to you, that's definitely going to play a factor a little bit. So, and like I said, no one wants to have to go through Foxborough. I mean, the Brady, Belichick, they rarely ever lose home games. So you want to avoid that if you can. So that's why locking up home field advantage was big for the Ravens. They needed that. I don't want to say they needed it, but it's obviously, again, it definitely helps you out. And yeah, so they were able to get that done. I mean, the Chiefs late tonight against the Bears, they were able to get it done. I mean, that game wasn't as close as some of the, like I said, the Eagles, Cowboys, or the Ravens, Browns were for a little bit, but it was still an important game. I mean, the Chiefs are still playing for a chance to get a bye. I mean, obviously they would need the Patriots to lose to the Dolphins next week, which not impossible, but probably not gonna happen. But still, it's just important. You want to try to win as many games as you can, and the Chiefs are riding high right now. I mean, they've won 5 in a row. Their defense is playing lights out right now. I believe they're averaging, giving up 10 points per game during this 5-game winning streak. And I mean, if they can do that leading into the playoffs and throughout the playoffs, I mean, they're going to be a tough out. I mean, they're already tough because they have such a great offense with Mahomes and all the weapons and Andy Reid and his creativity and all that fun stuff. But if their defense can hold it together and to now they're not only scoring on anybody, but now they can start to shut down teams too. I mean, they're be just as hard of an out as any team in the playoffs on the AFC side. I mean, they're already a team, again, people don't want to play because of that offense. But if they can find a way to get their defense together and keep it to where it continues to play at this level throughout the playoffs, I mean, it's going to be tough for anybody they play. And I'm just saying, I know the Patriots have already lost to them this year. They've beaten the Ravens this year, so it's not impossible to believe that the Chiefs could make a good run. And like I said, it's going to come down to that defense because we know, relatively speaking, Mahomes and offense is going to show up. But that defense, if they can keep that up and they can keep playing at that level, the Chiefs are going to be a team nobody's going to want to see. And obviously they're playing for a bye, but right now they don't have one. So if they can win next week and ride a 6-game winning streak into the playoffs, I mean, that's the kind of momentum and that's the kind of hot streak that can propel teams to a deep playoff run, even a Super Bowl run. So we'll see if they can get to that. But they weren't the Chiefs, Ravens, Eagles weren't the only teams that had very, very important games in terms of playoff positioning and making sure they got the job done. There were quite a few games on Saturday as well that had playoff implications that I will discuss more with you after the break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
As I was saying to you before the break, we were lucky enough to get some Saturday games in the NFL this weekend. Those were cool. We had the three games. I mean, obviously, with the bowl season just starting back up again, the NFL was able to take advantage of not as many games on the Saturday, and they definitely showed out in terms of all those games, for better or worse, were entertaining. I mean, it started off earlier in the day with the Buccaneers and the Texans, and that game was something else. I mean, Jameis is quite the adventure, I could say, just because you never really know going to the game what you're going to get from him. You could get 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. You could get a pick six, and to start the game, another pick six another interception that could have been a pick six if not for a penalty. He ended up throwing three interceptions in his first 11 passes, I believe. So just the entertainment factor, just from a just pure chaotic aspect of it, is always high whenever you get a Jameis game. But obviously unfortunately those turnovers between him, and then they also had another fumble from the Buccaneers did. So those 5 turnovers kind of help propel the Texans to the win and the AFC South title. I mean, the offense didn't play as well as you would have wanted them to, and then again, they can't count on the defense to get 5 turnovers every game, but what's important is you get a win, and then wins are hard to come by in this league, as any coach will attest to, any player will attest to. Anytime you can get a win is great, and anytime you can win your division is great, and that's what the Texans were able to do. So they're They don't have to worry about that. They're locked into the playoffs. And, I mean, again, they're still a team that if they can find a way to get J.J. Watt back to even help bolster that defense even more, but their defense that's playing better and their defense that clearly, as you can see, has the ability to turn the ball over and will produce turnovers. And obviously, I mean, they're not going to play Jameis every week, but if they can get a couple turnovers against some teams, whether it be Josh Allen in the first round because that's who they're matched up with right now, or whether that be Mahomes or Tom Brady later on down the line, if they're a team that can get that. I mean, they have the offense if Will Fuller can stay healthy because he's a big part of the offense. They have the offense even without him, with Deshaun and DeAndre in the running game with Carlos Hyde, that they can be a little scary. I mean, obviously they've been a bit up and down this season. Again, they're still at 10 wins, so they're not a bad team by any stretch. And they didn't just sneak into the playoffs, but they've been a little up and down. They've won some games that people were suppressed by. They've lost some games they probably shouldn't have. They've been in some close games that they probably shouldn't have. But again, once you get into the dance, it's all that really matters. So they found a way to get it done and get the win, and that's what's important. Just like the Patriots found a way to get the win and get the job done. I mean, that game was close there, down to the end. I mean, Josh Allen and the Bills gave them just about everything they can handle, but in the end, Brady, Belichick, they just found a way to win these games and win the AFC East. I mean, this is I believe, their 11th AFC East title in a row, something like that. And even though Tom Brady didn't put up gaudy numbers, the offense didn't put up gaudy numbers, but they did what they had to do. They got the score they needed to. They got the stops when they needed to, and that's really just what matters. Like I said, winning isn't easy, so you can't just you can't win pretty every week. Not everybody's going to be the Ravens or the the Niners are struggling recently, but the Niners from early in the season where you can just dominate teams on a weekly basis. It's not going to happen. It's not how most teams win, and that's definitely not how the Patriots have won this year. But when you look up at it, you're still 12-3, and it's hard to and it's hard to doubt. I mean, people are going to doubt them because Brady hasn't looked that good. The offense hasn't looked as good, but at the end of the day, they're still Brady, they're still Belichick, they still made it to the playoffs, and if they win next week, they'll get a bye. So now they have a week off, they have a week to game plan, scout, strategize on who their opponent is, and then you got to come into Foxborough, and that's a tough place to play for anybody. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how good your team is. Brady and Belichick are great at home. And that defense is sensational. Excuse me, but that defense is great. They got elite playmakers all over that secondary. They find ways to turn the ball over. They find ways to score when they do turn the ball over. So they're a team that even those high-powered offenses like the Chiefs and the Ravens, though they've beaten them this year, you don't have to go through the Patriots more times than you have to. Let me just say that. If you've played them once and you beat them, that's great. But it's the regular season, and everybody knows the Patriots and Tom Brady, Belichick, they are always focused on the postseason. So what you see and what may have happened in the regular season may not be important in the postseason. So it's definitely always a different animal for them. But like I said, once again, the Patriots just find a way to get it done, find a way to win the division. And I'm just touching on the Bills real quick. I want to give the Bills and Josh Allen credit because they gave, like I said earlier, they gave the Patriots all they could handle. I mean, there were times throughout the game where you thought that the Bills were really going to be able to pull it out, and even towards the end, they had a chance there. They had a chance there at first and goal, but they just unfortunately just weren't able to connect and get the ball into the end zone to help possibly force overtime or even play for the win. But like I said, the Bills are going to be a tough out there. Another team with a great defense. They have an elite playmaker in Trey White. They got guys that can get pressure. They got guys that even outside of Trey White in the secondary, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, they can make plays. They're very stingy. They're not going to give up a lot of points. They're not going to give up a lot of yards, and because of that, they're going to play a lot of ugly brawl type games and keep their offense in it. And then just all you got to hope for is Josh Allen can find a way to make some plays towards the end of there, and he's done that multiple times throughout the season. Unfortunately, like I said, he wasn't able to get it done this week, but he's done it more than enough times throughout the season. Obviously, like I said, they're already in the playoffs, so clearly he's doing something right. But like I said, that team's another one that's going to be scary. And I know that matchup if they do end up, they're going to end up playing the Texans. That'll be one that if the Texans' offense doesn't show up, that's a team that the Bills could be a dark horse kind of team, win a playoff game, maybe even two. And if they don't win the second one, give a team like the Ravens or the Patriots a scare there, just because, like I said, that defense is great. And Josh Allen, though he's not Lamar, he can make plays with his legs. He has a very strong arm, so he can make plays there too. And it's just like those are the kind of quarterbacks you are always tough to game plan and play against, just because you never really know what's going to happen. But like I said, the Patriots were able to get it done, win the division. Defeat a divisional opponent just like the 49ers were. I mean, then that game, that could have been the game of the weekend, honestly, that Rams-Niners game, and just that it was back and forth throughout. Just when you thought the Rams had pulled ahead, the Niners come back. Just when you thought the Niners had gone ahead, the Rams come back. And, I mean, Jimmy G, who didn't have his greatest game, but he seems like a guy who just always is finding ways to put out that at the end. I mean, even when it looked like they were dead, it's third and long, they get a conversion. Then they're in another third and long, they find a way to get Emmanuel Sanders deep down the field. He hits them. I mean, whether you want to call it a blown coverage or not on the Rams, he still got to make the throw. The Sanders still has to make the catch, and they were able to do that. And I'm just saying, if they can, I know the defense has been a little shaky for the 49ers the past couple weeks. But if they can get a way to shore that up, and like I said, if they win next week, they're the 1 seed, just because of the Seahawks being beaten earlier today by the Cardinals. If they win next week, they're the 1 seed, and that's, you get your bye, you can get your players healthy, and you get a home playoff game to start off. And that's, again, like I've been talking about for the last 2 segments, that's all teams ask for. They just get a home playoff game. That is crucial to be able to come in, have your first playoff game at home, have your fans behind you, have that crowd behind you, have the whole stadium behind you, and just get that kind of environment. And then, like I said, the Niners are a team that even without that offense, they've shown the ability that they can win so many different ways. They can win in ugly games, whether it's like that 9-0 game that they won in the rainstorm against Washington, or they can win shootouts like they did with the Saints earlier a couple weeks ago. They can win the kind of back and forth game where they need to drive there at the end, like they did this week against the Rams. I mean, all their losses have come down to the very end. So they're a team that is always in games, has shown the ability to blow teams out, has shown the ability to win different kinds of ways. So if they're a team that's going to be a tough out, and if they can secure the 1 seed against a Seahawks team that's going to go into that game banged up. They lost, on top of the fact they already lost Rashard Penny, they lost 2 more running backs today. Their starting offensive tackle is going to need knee surgery tomorrow, so who knows if he'll play. So they have a chance to secure the 1 seed, go to 13-3, and have the NFC go through them. And I mean, that'll be huge. Again, this is Jimmy G's though he's not young, he's still under 30, but he's just more so inexperienced in that. Like, he hasn't played in a playoff game yet, just because like he was the backup in New England for a couple of years, and then like the last couple of years he's been hurt. Well, last year he was hurt, so he didn't have a chance. But just having and even the rest of the team doesn't have that much playoff experience. I mean, they obviously had like the Richard Shermans of the world, and Emmanuel Sanders. They have a couple guys here and there with the experience, but most of their team is fairly new to this playoff. Is going to be fairly new to the playoffs whenever they get there. So being able to play that first game at home is going to be crucial for them, just to kind of help calm those nerves and get them feeling good about themselves. So yeah, this NFL weekend was packed. I mean, there's still another great game tomorrow. That should be with the Packers and Vikings, and there's going to be some great matchups next week, just in terms of finally determining who the final spot's going to be, who's going to be in, who's going to be out, who's going to be going where. And I mean, it's a shame. that at least the regular season come to them, but I mean, the playoffs are around the corner, and also with the NFL playoffs coming to an end, that means Christmas time is near, and that means the start of the NBA season. And you may be saying, Chris, what do you mean? The NBA has been playing for 2 months. What do you mean start of the NBA season? I'll explain to you exactly what I mean by that right after this break. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Before the break, I was talking about how the NBA season is just getting underway. And I know that may be a little bit confusing for you guys in terms of they've played 2 months of season. Teams are 20, 30 games into a year. So what do you mean the NBA season getting started? But as most people, most players, most coaches, most fans like to say, the NBA season doesn't start until Christmas Day. Now, the first 2 months of the season are great. Obviously, you get to see who gets off to a hot start, who's who start off a little slow, who have been the surprises, who have been the disappointments. But it is around this time when you start to see teams start to form their identity, decide who they're going to be, and kind of either take off or drop down. I mean, when you think about this time last year, I mean the Lakers were a top 4 or 5 seed in the playoffs. The Rockets were just barely clinging to the 8th seed. And the Magic, who were able to make the playoffs, were 5 games below 500. Not even the thought of the playoffs, and you can kind of see that after Christmas, those teams start to form, because you start to see teams, whether it's due to injury like the Lakers had, where they start to drop out, or you see teams start to gel, start to get hot. Even like the Nets last year were 7, 8 seed around Christmas time, and I mean they only ended up the 6th seed, but they would it was around this time where something just clicked with them. They started to get going, they started to get hot, and they started winning games, and D'Lo started to take over, and then next thing you know, they propelled themselves into the playoffs. I mean, this is Christmas time is great because you have obviously the marquee games, but like I was saying, that's really when you really start to see teams distinguish themselves, both good and bad, because we're going to see teams start to drop back a little bit in terms of that have gotten off to the great starts. I don't know who those are going to be, but I don't know who they're going to be just yet. But we can talk about that a little bit more in future podcast episodes. But you're also going to see teams start to separate themselves. I mean, you see teams that are playing at Christmas Day, like the Bucs. The Bucs have a chance. I mean, they've already distinguished themselves as one of, if not the best team in the league. They beat the Lakers earlier this week, and they're playing the Sixers on the Christmas Day in one of the major matchups of the day, and they have a chance to kind of even further separate themselves from everybody else. I mean, like I said, they're already the number one seed. They're already the best team in terms of point differential. They're one of the top scoring teams in the league. All that stuff, but they have a chance to kind of just show you that there's levels. There's levels to this. I mean, the Sixers they've been a good team this season. I mean, even through some of their inconsistencies, you can say, and kind of configure a new team, obviously losing Jimmy Butler, but bringing in guys like not Tobias, bringing back guys like Tobias, but bringing guys like Josh Richardson and Al Horford. They're still trying to work through some things. Obviously, Embiid's been in and out of the lineups due to injury, and then even a little up and down play from Ben Simmons this year has kind of messed with them. But they're still a top 4 team in the East. Excuse me. They're still one of the best teams in the league, and the Bucs have a chance to just further put themselves and stretch their lead on anybody else in the East, and just kind of just show people that last year wasn't a fluke. I mean, obviously, Giannis won MVP last year. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but people were uncertain on if that was just like a 1-year thing or they could do it again. And if they've shown anything is that this wasn't completely a fluke. I mean, they're 27-4. They're 5 games up on every other team in the East. At least like I said, they beat the best team in the West and the Lakers recently, and they're just playing great basketball. So that's going to be a great game. The matchups are going to be great. I mean, Embiid and Giannis going against each other is always great. I mean, though they won't necessarily be matched up against each other, just seeing 2 of the best players in the league go against each other is always a great thing. But it's also be a chance for Ben Simmons to kind of show that, hey, look, I may not be Giannis yet, but I'm still just as good as any other player in the East. And that'll be a big test for the Sixers. I mean, it really will be. It's in Philadelphia. They've been great at home. The Sixers have been great at home this year, so that'll be big for them. I mean, they've I know they struggled. They've struggled a little bit recently, losing 3 out of their last 4 games, but they have a chance to get right tomorrow, Monday. Oh, well, I guess today when you guys are listening to this, against the Pistons before that game. But like I said, this is a big show-out game for both sides. And this is definitely one of the ones that I'm looking forward to on Christmas Day. Another one in the game I'm definitely looking forward to is the matchup of LA, Clippers-Lakers. I mean, they haven't played since opening night, when obviously that was the first time the Lakers had ever played together in terms of all their new pieces. I don't think Kuzma played in that game, so they weren't at full strength. And who knows if they will be at full strength for this game with LeBron. He had to sit out the game against the Nuggets tonight, which they lost with a muscle strain. So hopefully he can play he can play and suit up for that for Christmas, because that'll be a huge loss if they can't play, especially against the Clippers. And from the Clippers' perspective, I mean, it's the same thing. They weren't at full strength in that first game. They didn't have Paul George. Again, they were a team that, even though a lot of the guys, whether it's the Lou Wills or the Shamrocks or the Harrells or Zubac, like some of those guys had played together, they hadn't played with Kawhi before, and they were able to find a way to pull it out there that first game. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up this time with both teams at full strength. I mean, it's gonna be great, and like I said, hopefully LeBron can play, because that'll be big for them just to see. I wanted to see how those two teams match up at full strength, because this is a matchup that many people are looking forward to coming to the season. This is still a matchup that many people believe could be a Western Conference Finals preview. So, and like I said, I know the Lakers are gonna want to. I mean, revenge is not the right word, just because like regular season games only matter so much, and obviously with guys like LeBron, they understand the importance of the playoffs more than the regular season. So they're not going to put too much emphasis on a regular season game, but obviously this is a huge matchup just because you don't want to go down in the season series already 2-0 to the Clippers, just because you have to answer questions about them now being the team that runs LA and all that fun stuff. Even though, I mean, obviously you're going to have to take, even though LeBron's have been there long, you're going to have to take any sort of crown from LeBron's heads in the playoffs. I concern myself enough with the regular season, but not too much to where all that stuff is great, but they're gonna have to do it in the playoffs in order to really prove it to LeBron himself and prove it to the league that they're ready to be that top team in LA. But like I said, a win on Christmas Day will be a good step towards getting people to believe that they really are who people thought they could be going into the season. And obviously, they're another team that's not really too worried about the regular season with the load management of Kawhi and everything. They're just trying to get to the postseason and then have everybody healthy, and then from there they think they can beat anybody. But I mean, this is a great test for both sides just to see where they stack up in terms of the elite teams out there in the West. And I mean, along with that, we also have the Celtics and the Raptors, which is another great matchup. I mean, both those teams are coming kind of riding high. The Raptors needed a 30-point comeback today to get the win, so they'll be seeing if they can hopefully not have to rely on that every game, because that's not necessarily sustainable. But obviously, it's a little bit different with Siakam not being in there. Obviously, he's there. He's out. He's clearly their best player and has been their best player this season. So things are a little bit different from there. So that's the only downside to this matchup, is that I don't believe Siakam will be ready to play at that point. But they still have a lot of good pieces. I mean, Lowry was great in the fourth quarter earlier today against the Mavericks. I believe if he didn't outscore them, it was definitely pretty close in terms of that fourth quarter where he was just dominant after they were down 30 late there in the third, which is, I mean, it's the first 30-point comeback in the league, obviously. It's the biggest comeback, and it's the biggest comeback in 10-plus years. I don't think anybody come back from down 30 in over 10 years. So that's great, and obviously they will use some of that momentum, even though they play against the Pacers tomorrow, which is another good team, so we'll see how they kind of hold on that. But then obviously they'll have the day off before they play Christmas, so that Celtics game, Raptors Celtics, is going to be a big one. It'll be in Toronto, so they always have a great home crowd there. And from the Celtics perspective, they're coming in riding high off of a big game from Jason Tatum. He put up a career high 39 points. That's going to be big for them. See if he can kind of continue to take those leaps this year. I mean, he stepped up. The guy that Jaylen Brown stepped up. They've kind of integrated Kemba Walker very well into their team, so they've looked good, and so that'll be a great matchup. Another potential, hopefully, playoff matchup we could see further on down the line. I mean, obviously, it's going to be a little different because Siakam's not there, but it's still going to be a great matchup. And then a couple other games we have today left. We got the Rockets and the Warriors, which is unfortunately not the game we thought it could be heading into the season. Obviously, the Rockets-Warriors matchups have been great over the past few seasons, both in the regular season and in the playoffs there. Seems like those games are always close. They always come down to the wire. Those teams play each other very tough. They know each other very well. So those games were always entertaining. But unfortunately, the Warriors are just a tad bit banged up, you could say, this season. I mean, obviously, no Steph, no Clay. Draymond's been in and out of the lineup. D'Lo's been in and out of the lineup. This is definitely not the team people thought they were going to be heading to the season. And again, this isn't the matchup we thought we were going to get. So the Rockets should be able to get the job done. But I mean, the Warriors they're a team that's, even though they're a little undermanned and don't have the talent of some of these other top teams, they play hard most nights there, and it's like they have a bunch of young guys, so they're not really. They're going to give most nights. They're going to give that effort. They're going to give that energy that maybe a veteran team might not always gab, just because they may be a little tired. Young guys always seem to come with that energy every night. So the Rockets shouldn't sleep on this one, because you don't want to come out and quote unquote get embarrassed on Christmas Day. Because I mean, in the eyes of many, losing to this Warriors team, would definitely be a tad bit shocking for the Rockets. But that, I mean, like I said, the Rockets-Warriors games are always interesting, so that'll still be interesting. Then rounding it out, we got the Pelicans and the Nuggets, another matchup that looked better on paper heading into the season, but obviously without Zion, that loses some of its luster. And then also the Pelicans just haven't really lived up to what people's expectations were for them. I mean, they were a team that wasn't too great last year, but people thought, oh, you bring in, you trade away Anthony Davis, which is a big hit, but you bring in Brandon Ingram, who's been great. You've been Lonzo, You bring in Lonzo, who people thought was going to take a step up this year. He unfortunately hasn't. You bring in Josh Hart. You still have Drew Holiday. Like I said, they thought they were going to have Zion. Jackson Hayes is the guy that looked good in Summer League and in preseason, so they thought that he'd be helpful. But unfortunately, they just haven't been able to piece it together. But again, when you have a team and you have a guy that is playing as well offensively as Brandon Ingram has this season, in terms of he's definitely one of, if not, I don't want to say the leading candidate, because Devontae Graham from the Hornets is playing as well as anybody in terms of guys that have taken a big leap this year. So but on terms of that, Ingram's been great for the Pelicans this season. I mean, I don't know where they would be without him, just because he's been one of their consistent guys week in and week out, game in, game out, averaging 25 for them a night, which is obviously what they need when you lose a guy like Anthony Davis. You need somebody that's going to take up that scoring, and Ingram has put it on himself, and he worked on his game this summer, and he got a lot better, clearly, and it's taken form in the regular season, at least so far. So hopefully they can keep that up. But like I said, the NBA season's just getting started. I mean, we still have a long, long way to go until April, and then obviously until June. And I know fans are definitely excited for these Christmas Day matchups. I mean, even some of the quote-unquote lesser ones, it should still be entertaining. And obviously, it's Christmas, so you love just sitting around after you finish getting presents and just watching NBA basketball all day. I mean, there's not really many better things you could do. So I know, like I said, the fans will be looking forward to that. Unfortunately, some of the fans, unfortunately, that's not all the news that it's coming out of the NBA this week, as there was another incident with a fan and a player this past weekend, and we're going to have to touch on that and some of just like the ways in which fans interact with players, and they have been interacting with players over the years, and what can be done to improve that. We will touch on that, and I will touch on that after this break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
We are back here on the GSMC Sports. So as I was saying before, there was an incident this weekend involving Isaiah Thomas of the Wizards and a fan, in which he said that the fan was being very disrespectful towards him after he made a free throw that had he missed it, would have gotten the crowd frosties. And Isaiah Thomas went into the stands to confront this fan. No, not aggressively, but just kind of talk to him about, hey, like, he didn't like being disrespected, and the fan said his piece about him wanting a frosty, and it wasn't that serious. But unfortunately, Isaiah Thomas has been suspended 2 games for that. Even though, like I said, it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't anything, it was nothing malicious. He didn't go in there and do anything over the top to the fan. He would just wanted to talk to him about, hey, that's not how I as a man should be treated. And especially not as a person who, especially not by a fan, just because that's just not the way that he believed that the conduct should be, the way fans should conduct themselves. Let me say that. The way fans should conduct themselves at games. So he was unfortunate about that. But But that's just the thing where if you go into the stands, for whatever reason it is, you're going to get suspended just because the NBA doesn't want any more malice in the palace situations happening. And I completely understand from their perspective. I mean, they have a rule in place where anybody that goes into a stand is automatically ejected. I mean, Isaiah Thomas was already ejected, so that's where that aspect of it didn't matter. But because of that, they have to suspend him at least. I mean, he may appeal it. It may get dropped down to only a game or something because, like I said, there's nothing malicious that happened. Nothing, he didn't attack the fan. He didn't put his hands on the fan. None of that stuff happened. But it was just one of those situations where you, unfortunately, can't go up into the stands and confront fans as a player. Just because, like I said, there's been incidences in the past where these things have gone a way in which a league is trying to avoid having them go to again. But at the same time, I feel like there has to be something better. So there has to be a better way for fans to be policed, so that from their perspective they can avoid doing these things. Because a lot of fans feel like just because they paid money to get into the arena, they paid money for their tickets, they root for the opposing team, they can just say and do whatever they want to players, and that's not right either. Obviously, there was earlier this week, there was the story that came out about the Utah Jazz fan who got banned for life by the NBA and by the Jazz after the incident he had back in March of last season. Well, March earlier this year, but it was the last NBA season with Russell Westbrook. In terms of Russell said some things back to him after Russell said that the fans said some disrespectful and racially charged things to him, towards him, and then obviously the Jazz and the league did their investigation. The fan was banned for life, but he's suing Russell and the Utah Jazz for $100 million. I mean, he's not going to get that, but obviously when you're suing a millionaire athlete and you're suing a sports franchise, you can ask for that just because that's just what people do. But he's suing them for defamation because he said that he lost his job. He's received death for threats and different kind of remarks based on the news that got out there about that incident. Even though he still claims he didn't really do anything wrong, but it's just that, like, those kind of situations. And again, Russell is a guy that's had instances with other fans, whether it be in Utah during the playoffs, where it's been in Philly, different places. He's had issues with the fans, but he's not the only one. A lot of players have had a lot of different players have issues with the fans, and that's just the kind of thing that the league is trying to work its way through. And like you would think that like banning fans, kicking them out, all that stuff would help kind of mitigate this stuff, but it really hasn't. Fans still are just as bold, just as brazen as they've ever been when it comes to stuff, and I think a lot of that stems just from a sense of, like I said, the entitlement of, I pay for the seat, they pay for my seats, by me coming to the game and paying for stuff, I'm helping pay your salary. They believe that just because they paid money to get in, they can say and do whatever they want to players and with no retaliation. And also I think a part of that stems from the social media era that we live in, where there aren't really ramifications for what people say on the internet. And I think that's unfortunately kind of extended over into real life. And I think it's the thing that the league is going to have to try to work through, and has continued to work through, and will continue to work through the year, just because we're getting fans that are more bold, and it's all good, and all it takes is just one athlete, one player, just to lose it in a moment, and now we have a situation that no one wants. And it's just that it's a shame that kind of thing could happen. But like I said, it's just the fans need to realize that there are things you can do at a game and things you can't do at a game, and unfortunately some of these fans are crossing that line of what they can't do, and because of the fact that players are so afraid of getting fined, getting kicked out of the league, getting suspended for doing something to these fans, they can't retaliate against them, and they shouldn't retaliate against them. I would never suggest that, but because of that, fans just feel like they can say or do anything without any ramifications. And unfortunately, there has to be a way that the league can police this a little bit better. I mean, whether it is, like I said, because clearly just banning fans, taking away their tickets, kicking them out the games isn't enough to stop this. I don't know exactly what the league can do, but I do know that the league has to try to do something, just because we're getting closer and closer with each day to something else happening that the league does not want to have to deal with. And I don't think no one wants to see. I mean, as a fan of sports myself, and as anybody listening to this podcast is a fan of sports, you don't ever want to fear that your heckling, you could say, will lead to any sort of physical harm to you. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can just heckle in a way that is derogatory or disrespectful to the players. And I think that's just kind of like the fine line where we've been walking on these past few years. And this, like I said, especially in the social media era, just because fans feel like through their social medias and then extend it on to real life that they say things all the time to players. I mean, the players get harassed on social media. Fans are constantly tweeting at them, saying bad things about them every game they lose, saying bad things about them if they beat their teams. It's a shame that that's kind of the world we're in right now, where people just feel like they can say and do whatever they want just because, and just have no sort of ill effects of that. And it's just something that we're gonna have to try to find a way to work through, just because we're getting close to a situation where something bad's gonna happen. And it's not going to be surprising to me, just because I've been to enough games where I've heard some of the things the fans have said. I've seen enough of the things that fans have said on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram to different players. Just even if on teams that they are a fan of, they say crazy things to them. Many players talk about all the time how they get crazy things in their comments and in their mentions after losses. So I can only imagine what you're saying to a player on a team that you don't like. So it's just one of those things where it's just where hopefully, like I said, hopefully Isaiah Thomas doesn't go through that again this season, and hopefully more fans learn as more fans get kicked out and get their season tickets taken away, because those Sixers fans, they get those season tickets taken away. They got refunded by the team, but they got the season tickets taken away. So as more of that is beginning to happen, showing that there are consequences to these actions for fans, we'll continue to see that stuff start to die down. But again, until it does, we always going to run the risk of something happening. What that something is, I don't know, and obviously I hope it's nothing bad. But like I said, the fans are way too bold these days and are willing to just say and do whatever they want to players, like I said, without any fear that anything will come back to them. And that, in my opinion, that's just not right. That's just not right. And I mean, I've seen different sides of this. I mean, some people agree. Some people feel like, hey, look, I paid money to get in here. I can say and do what I want. Some people are on the side of the players in that, hey, look, just because you paid doesn't mean you can disrespect somebody's family, their kids, their mother, their wives, spouses, whoever, siblings. There's a line that you cross as a fan when it comes to heckling, and I feel like too many fans cross those lines and then are surprised when either players say things back or something happens and like they get banned from arenas and in games and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just like fans are, unfortunately, we just live in a world where fans are entitled and they feel like they deserve to get everything they want. And basketball isn't the only sport. I mean, just looking at college football, I mean, the bowl game season is upon us now, finally, thank goodness. I mean, I know I'm excited about that. But during this time, there are many players that decide that they don't want to play in the bowl games. And many fans take to their social medias to talk bad about their players. And I'm going to tell you why I believe that they shouldn't. And then I think the players have the right to sit out those games if they so choose to after the break.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast. So as I was saying before, in the last segment, fans on many different levels are entitled. And some of that entitlement is in professional sports, and some of the entitlement stems down to college sports. And I mean, the bowl game in this time of the year is a big time for that sort of entitlement, in that now you're going to see guys who around college football who decide that they're just like, I've done enough. I think I'm going to set out my bowl game. And you'll see many people take to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even analysts and commentators on TV talk about how they don't think it's right. And I'm just not in that camp. I am 100% for, especially NCAA players, I'm 100% for them doing what they believe is in the best interest of themselves. Just because they're playing a sport at what is said to be an amateur level, though everyone around them makes money. The only reason for these bowl games really is just so that schools and these TV networks can make more money, because there's random bowl games that pop up more and more year after year. And again, I love college football, so I am not knocking those extra bowl games, but at the same time, I'm also not going to sit here and disparage players that decide that, hey, this isn't in the best interest for me to play in this bowl game. Because when you look at guys that have played in bowl games and have suffered because of that, and you look back at the Jalen Smiths of the world, who was going to that game where he got hurt, was a consent. I mean, it's hard to say because the draft is wildly unpredictable, but was pretty confidently a top 5, top 10 pick or what was believed to be a top 5, top 10 pick in the upcoming draft. And he goes out, tears his ACL, his MCL in its first quarter too. So it wasn't even like it was late in the game. This was like very, very early in the game. I understand this was a New Year's 6th day bowl. It was going to be his last college game, but it wasn't part of the college football playoff. So in the grand scheme of things, the game didn't really matter that much. But it was still like a big game. Obviously, it was the Fiesta Bowl, so that's always a big bowl game. Players always want to play in that. But yeah, he gets hurt midway through the first quarter, and he loses out on what he could have lost out on possibly his career, because like I said, the nerve damage. Many people, many doctors that I listened to talk about the injury around the draft time, because I was just curious about him and how he was going to recover. Believe there was a chance he wasn't ever going to play in the league again, and obviously he has, and he's done well. He's gotten a contract extension from the Cowboys. He's played well for them, so he hasn't suffered too much. But I mean, the drop off from a top 5, top 10 pick money all the way down to a second round pick money is steep, and that's money that he may never get to make back. Like I said, obviously he's gotten his contract extension, but he lost out on millions and millions of dollars that, had he decided that, hey, look, I'm a guy that's going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. I haven't made any money yet playing football. I have the chance to go make lots of money doing it. I think I'm going to sit out. I would have understood. And he's not the only guy that's ended up like that. Jake Butt, the next year, a tight end from Michigan, he was the guy that was projected to be a second, third round pick. So not exactly Jalen Smith's level, but still a pretty high draft pick. He had already suffered an ACL tear during his time in college while at Michigan, and he decided that he was going to play in the bowl game because he's a senior. It was his last game of the year. Again, it was during a big bowl game, the Orange Bowl, but it was a non-playoff game, a non-college football playoff game. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's not like you're playing for a championship. So, I would understand if the guys that are playing for a championship, if they don't decide they want to sit out the bowl game. But if you're just like a regular old bowl game, I see why players do. And he got hurt, and then like I said, he was already coming in. He had already suffered an ACL tear during his time in college, so that was a red flag. I knocked him down to the 5th round, and then he got hurt again during his rookie year, and has never really carved out a role for himself so far in his NFL career. And that's just the thing where had he sat out, I mean, it's not. Football's a game where you're going to get injuries, so I'm not going to say that he would have had a clean bill of health throughout his NFL career, but he could have at least started out a little better. He would have came in not having to be on IR, miss a whole year, rehab, do all that stuff, and that's just like a couple examples. And that's when, I mean, I don't want to say Jalen Smith was the first example, but he was definitely the biggest. I remember the next year, guys like Leonard Fournette. So this is the year that Jake Butt got hurt. Leonard Fournette sat out the bowl game. Christian McCaffrey sat out the bowl game because they were all but locked in to being first-round picks. They both ended up going in the top 10. They both ended up going in the top 10. So clearly the game didn't really affect sitting out that game didn't really affect their draft stock, and especially when you're playing a position like running back, you run the risk of you're a position that declines very, very early in their careers. So you have to try to preserve your body, get as little carries as you can on your body, and make sure that you get to the NFL as healthy as you can, just because you don't really know how long you're going to be there. You don't know how long you're going to be there at least especially at a high and productive level. So if you can find a way to do that, then you can do that. And I completely understand. I mean, more guys had it last year that it didn't really affect guys like Ed Oliver, who went in the first round, Greedy Williams that went in the first round, Devin Bush that went in the first round, all rookies now. They sat out their bowl game. It didn't really affect them. I know guys are sitting out the bowl game this year. Andrew Thomas, a tackle from Georgia, one of if not the top tackle prospect coming out this year, decided he's going to sit out. Multiple guys from Alabama decided they were going to sit out the bowl game. And if you're a guy who's playing in a bowl game that isn't, if you're a guy that's not playing for the college football playoff and playing for a national championship, I 100% am for and understand if you want to sit out your bowl game, because at the end of the day, this one game, I understand it's technically it's going to be the last game of your career, so you want to go out on a win, enjoy that. But if you're a guy that's going to get drafted pretty high, this game is not going to sway like people's opinions, whether good or bad. Like there's very little you can do that'll drop your draft stock drastically, and there's very little you can do that will improve your draft stock greatly. So there's the pros and cons of playing in this last meaningless bowl game don't make any sense in my perspective. I mean, if I was a person if I grow up and I have a kid that's in this scenario, I'm telling them, hey, look, if you don't want to play, by all means go for it. I mean, because as many people say, your best ability is availability. So if you've gotten through your junior year, senior year completely healthy, and you don't want to risk that one freak injury in the last game of your career, right before you're going to go into the draft, you're going to go into the draft, I 100% agree with just sitting out, because it's not worth it. It really isn't, in my opinion, especially when, I mean, maybe it'll be a little bit different when the players can begin to profit off their likeness and stuff like that in a couple years, but as of right now, where they're not getting paid and the only way they're going to get paid is when they make it to the next level, preserving your body to make sure you make it to the next level in one piece is more important than winning one game. I mean, no, many guys are like, oh, they're giving up on the team, oh, they're giving up on their school, and they're giving up on their coach. And I'm just like, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, the coaches are in it for themselves. The schools are in it for themselves. I mean, coaches leave programs all the time without consulting the players. They do what's in the best interest of them and their family. They take jobs and opportunities at bigger and better schools or in the NFL. So why is it so bad for the player to do that same thing? Especially, again, where coaches and the schools and all that stuff, they're getting paid to do this. So there's even more of an investment into the school because you've signed a contract and you are financially tied into that school. Players aren't like that. They've chosen to go there. They go in there to get they're on a football scholarship, so they're not necessarily paying for school, but they're not getting paid to go there. There is a difference, and in that regard, it just doesn't make any sense to me why. If you have the chance to go pro and you're going to be a high draft pick, why even risk it? It just doesn't make any sense. And I just don't. And I hate when people say that the players are being selfish because everybody's selfish in life, no matter what you're doing. You may say you're not, but at the same time, you've done things that are in the best interest for you and may not be in the best interest for somebody else, and as you should. I mean, no one's going to care about you more than you are. So if you got to do things, you got to make moves and you got to make decisions that benefit you maybe more than they may benefit somebody else. I mean, I would understand if you do that in your regular life, so I don't understand why just because a player is on a team or goes to a school that you support, that means that they shouldn't be allowed to do that exact same thing, especially when millions and millions and millions of dollars may be on the line if they get hurt. So I understand fans' disappointment when they see their favorite players not out there for the bowl games, but it's just something you have to deal with. And I mean, it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate part of the sport, but it's just something that's going to keep happening. And again, like I said, I understand it. So those fans are disappointed. I know there are definitely some fans of NFL teams that have been even more disappointed by their team's performances this year. I mean, there have been quite a few teams that have underperformed as of this point this season, and I feel like we should talk about them. And I have my top 5 teams. You may agree, you may disagree. You may have people that you would take on. You may have people you would put on. May have people you would take off the list. But I'm going to tell you the top 5 teams that I think have disappointed their fans and have underachieved this season, coming up right after this last break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
We are back here for one last time on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So as I was saying before, there are quite a few teams that I feel like in the NFL have disappointed this season. Like I say, we just completed week 16 tonight. We're coming up on the end of the season, and I feel like we need to touch on some of these teams that have disappointed relative to their expectations coming into the year. So, I'm gonna go bottom up just to leave you guys with a little bit of suspense. Just so I don't want to start at 1 because that's how people normally do. So I'm gonna go backwards. I'm gonna start at 5. And my number 5 team that is disappointed relative to expectations is the Chargers. And I mean, the Chargers are a team that almost every season they are loaded on offense and defense. And this year is really no different. I mean, they were a team that was in the playoffs last year. They won a playoff game against the Ravens, even though that was a rookie Lamar, but they still won a playoff game. They didn't really put up too much of a fight against the Patriots. However, like I said, they're still in the playoffs. They're still a team that, coming to the season, everyone is talking about as a dark horse Super Bowl team, as a contender, all that good stuff. And they have just completely underachieved this season. I mean, they're 5-10 right now with one game left in the season. And even I know Derwin James got hurt before the season, but that does not excuse them for how as poorly as they played the season, especially on the offensive side. With as many weapons as they have, even though they were missing Melvin Gordon early in the year because of the holdout, Austin Eckler stepped up, filled in his role just as good, if not better than they could have imagined. They still have Keenan Allen. They still have Mike Williams. Hunter Henry's been in and out, but they still have him. They still have Phillip Rivers, and honestly, he's been probably the most disappointing part of it all. Is this that Phillip Rivers is not having the season that you would expect from him. In that, normally, I mean, he's a guy that's gonna throw some interceptions here and there. Like that's understandable, and I understand he's also getting up there in a little bit in age. But I mean, he's just the guy that's just continued to turn the ball over just at an alarming rate. If it weren't for Jameis, he would be up there for the league lead in interceptions this season, and that's just not a thing that he normally does. I mean, I don't want to say that because he has some big interception years, but normally he can make up for that by throwing for a lot of touchdowns. And this year, he hasn't really been doing that as much. I mean, the numbers aren't that much worse than the numbers in terms of yards aren't that much worse than last year, but he's through 16 games last year he had 32 touchdowns, and this year only has 21, and he has 6 more interceptions with a game left. So him and the Chargers, Phillip Rivers and the Chargers have been one of the biggest disappointments this season, in my personal opinion. And going up to number 4, I'm going to talk about the team that lost tonight on Sunday Night Football, and that was the Chicago Bears. And they were another team that was in the playoffs last year. It looked like with first-year head coach Matt Nagy, he won Coach of the Year. Mitch Trubisky, a second-year quarterback who, unfortunately for him, just in terms of comparison, got picked before Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, so people are always going to compare them, but he looked like he had taken at least a little bit of a step forward this year, and they just, as a whole team, have taken a step back. And I mean, some of that is on Trubisky. He struggled a little bit earlier in the season, but I don't want to cast the blame all solely on one player because he's also missed a couple of games, so that's not all on him. But I know he had his struggles early in the season, but I think more so the issue is just that the defense isn't what it had been. At least this year. I mean, the defense, I don't want to say that because the defense is still good, obviously, but they're just not getting maybe the defense is a little bit different with Chuck Pagano and Vic Fangio gone, but they're just not really getting the turnovers, really. That's what it is. It's really just turnovers because the offense the defense is still 3rd in points and 8th in yards, but they're just not getting turnovers at the rate that they were, and they're not scoring as many touchdowns off those turnovers. And because of that, the offense that has struggled a little bit this season, whether that be due to their lack of a running game, which they could have had they not traded away Jordan Howard, unfortunately. I mean, David Montgomery's a rookie that they have high hope for the future, and he's done pretty decently this year, but Jordan Howard has looked like, even though he's missed a few games, he looked like earlier in the season the guy they could have used, but the defense just hasn't gotten the turnovers at the rate in which they did last year, and because of that, the offense is not getting those short fields that they had last year in order to get those quick, easy touchdown or field goal drives. They've having to drive the full length of the field most of the time, and it just hasn't been good for them, whether that be because Mitch has regressed, whether that's because Matt Nagy's regressed as a play caller, whatever that be. whatever that may be, they've struggled this season, and that's just unfortunate. And moving on to number 3, another team that has definitely struggled this season, we're talking about the Browns. Now, the Browns are a little bit different because they're obviously a team that has struggled mightily for the past decade, as they were officially the only team to not have a winning season this decade, I believe. I think that became official. Well, I mean, obviously not going to have a winning record this year, but I'm pretty sure they were the only team to not have one this decade. But so they're a team that, again, another team that people had high hopes for, and maybe that's the media or the fans' fault for hyping them up just because they had a bunch of players whose names we recognized. But at the same time, when with great expectations, if you don't meet them, then we have to discuss a disappointment. They are definitely one of those teams that has disappointed quite a bit. Baker has regressed, which is shocking in terms that you would think you have Jarvis Landry, you have Odell, who have been healthy all year, you have Nick Chubb, who's been healthy all year. Obviously, lost their tight end Njoku for a while, but he looked like a guy who was going to continue to take that step. Obviously, he had a great rookie season. He had a great rookie season. He set the rookie record for touchdown passes, I believe, with 27. He's a guy that didn't really turn the ball over that much as a rookie. He won 6 games as a rookie, and for the Browns, that's obviously good just because of the struggles they've had at the quarterback position this year. Like last year, in 13 games, he only had 14 picks, and this year he has 17, but at least with those 14 picks, I mean, he's a rookie, so it is what it is, but he had 27 touchdowns. And this year, through one extra game, he has only 17 touchdowns. He has less yards. His completion percentage has dropped by over 3 points, so he's regressed. And a part of that maybe because of the coach. And I think that's the biggest thing that people overlooked when coming to the season, just like how important an experienced head coach matters, especially for a young guy. When obviously Freddie Kitchens was promoted, it's not his fault. He was promoted partly because of how well the offense looked with Baker, but that was with him calling the plays. And I mean, he's still calling the plays, but when you go from a guy who was position coach to then a play caller to then the head coach, your responsibilities change, and they change kind of drastically, and maybe he just wasn't quite ready for that step up in power. And as a team that has been so undisciplined, they're one of the top teams in penalties. Obviously, they had the Myles Garrett situation with the Steelers a few weeks back, but they've been this one is a reflection of coaching, and they've lacked that this season for whatever reason, because they've struggled, and now they are 6-9, heading into week 17. They could finish 6-10, but I mean 7-9. But I mean, again, based on where they were expected to be at this point this season, that's not at all. And again, maybe that's not necessarily their fault. They didn't rate them that high. But I mean, again, Baker he's done a lot of commercials. They had a lot of name value. He did interviews in the off season. So when you have that, and you place that target on yourself, you have to live with what comes with it. And unfortunately, what comes with it is a disappointing season from their aspect. But even though the Browns have been quite disappointing, they're not as bad as either of these top two teams, who I think you could interchange. Some people may say the team I have at 1 is 2 and the team I have at 2 is 1, and vice versa. But right now, I'm going to stick with number 2 as the Cowboys, just because they still have a chance to make the playoffs. Luckily for them, they played in the worst division in the league this year, so they're not out of it just yet. But they are currently 7-8. They're a team that has struggled with consistency all year. They're a team that came into the year with their coach as a lame duck, so you knew that they needed to get to the playoffs, make it far in the playoffs, in order to keep his job, and they just haven't lived up to those expectations. Again, they're another team with talent all over the roster. They've had minimal injuries. I mean, they've had Amars, I think, is a little bit more nicked up than people let on. Obviously, Dak has had his shoulder injury that he played through this week. No one really knows how bad it is, but you could tell that he struggled a little bit with his accuracy today, and that may have been partly because of that injury. But they've just been a team that's lacked consistency, and as Jerry Jones has stated on obvious occasions, he paid for the team, he is paying for a team that he thought was a Super Bowl contender, and obviously right now they're not. They might not even make the playoffs. So that in and of itself is a big disappointment. Again, they were another team that was in the playoffs last year, won a playoff game last year. So you would think they're their quarterback who's played better this year, had a career year. They still have Zeke. They paid Jalen Smith. They paid La'el Collins. They're paying guys off their rookie deal. So they had a bunch of guys on their rookie deal. They got a bunch of talent. Now they're getting off their rookie deal. And when you have more guys getting paid, it's harder to win because you can't field a team as much because you have less money, obviously. It's simple math. But they're a team that just hasn't lived up to what many people thought they would be, what many people still think they could be if they made the playoffs, but it's just like they just haven't shown that they're that team week in and week out. So that's why they're my number 2. Even though, again, they could make the playoffs, they could get all the critics and haters, if you want to call them that, off their backs with getting into the playoffs. Again, like, they need the Eagles to lose. They don't control that anymore based on what happened today. But they can still do that. They can still make a deep playoff run if they won, but that's just not how it's going to go. And then, but lastly, number 1 team, got to be the Rams. It has to be, in my opinion, because they paid the quarterback in the offseason. They've traded away picks. They've given big money out to different guys. They've brought in big-name veterans and Clay Matthews and Eric Weddle in order to kind of fill out the roster and give them some of that veteran leadership because they have a lot of young guys on the team. They traded for Jalen Ramsey, who was believed to be a top one of not the top corner in the league at the time. He hasn't played like that this season, but they still traded for him. They traded away multiple picks. They're going to have to pay him this offseason most likely because he held out last offseason for money. So I don't see why he wouldn't also want the same thing this offseason. And it's, again, they were a team that was in the Super Bowl last year. And I mean, you could even say they disappointed. The disappointment started in that Super Bowl game when they put up 3 points. But you expect, all right, they're going to go back, they're going to work through it this offseason. That's just the thing that hasn't happened. It just didn't happen this year. And for whatever reason that is, I don't really know. But they're just a team that, again, much like the Cowboys, have been inconsistent. They're a team who before last week looked like they were starting to figure some things out, starting to get it together. And then they come in last week against the Cowboys, lay a complete egg, get rolled over. It's unfortunate. It happens. It happens to the team. Everybody gets blown out. But then this week, I mean, they played a close game with the Niners, but again, they still lost. They're out of playoff contention. They're not going to make it back to the playoffs. And then they have more questions than they have answers at this point, really, because you have questions about the offensive play calling in the scheme because the offense is taking a downturn. You have a question about that offensive line because Bucs offensive lineman is old, is on the higher side of 30, and you don't know how much longer he's going to play. You have questions about their running back and if he's ever going to be anything close to what he was, because right now it doesn't look like that. You have questions about the quarterback because you paid him all that money. He's still not really getting paid. The contract extension hasn't hit yet, but it's going to hit next season. And you have questions about if he's the right guy for the job, but you're kind of stuck with him, so you kind of have to work through that. And there's nothing worse than being tied to a bad quarterback. That's how teams stay mediocre. You have no first round picks the next 4 or 5 years to help improve your team with good young cheap talent, which is important on teams that are very heavy in terms of payroll wise. And then you still got to pay Jalen Ramsey, and then you're in a division where you have 2 teams that are going to make the playoffs, in the Seahawks and the Niners. Russell Wilson isn't going anywhere, and Jimmy G isn't going anywhere. Neither of those coaches are going anywhere, and you're just like, all right, are we even going to be the best team in our division next year? And I know most people won't say that. I mean, we'll see what happens in the offseason, what moves they make, how they try to fix the team, but many people are going to come into next year and be like, no, they're not even the best team. They might even be the second best team in their division. So it's like, where do you go from there? Because you're paying players and you have the payroll of a team that should be one of the best in the league because you got talent everywhere. You have a head coach that many people think is one of the best offensive minds in the league. You have a good defense coordinator, Wade Phillips, who may not be back next year. So you got to figure out how that's going to work. And you're just like, you're kind of just like stuck in like this weird purgatory area where if you keep Jared Goff, it's like, how far can you go with Jared Goff? So you got the Super Bowl, you didn't do anything, and I'm like, is that as good as it's going to get. And if that's the case, then they're in trouble because they're not paying for a team that's good enough to lose in the Super Bowl. They're paying for a team that's good enough to win a Super Bowl. And if they don't do that, then they're in trouble. And I'm just saying it's going to be a very interesting offseason for all these teams that I've listed just because they have some big decisions to make from coaching to players to front office. A lot of them do, and in order to get back to where they want to be and where they should have been this season, they're gonna have to make some big time changes, and it's just I don't know if all of them can do that in one offseason to get back to where they could be. But if they do, they make all the right decisions, then we could be talking about how these teams are some of the biggest turnarounds next year, and I hope they are. I don't ever. You don't want to see some of the marquee franchises, whether it be the Cowboys or the Bears or the Rams, be down, but it's like, hey, this is where they're at right now, and they're at a crossroad. They can either continue down the path of where they're on in disappointment, or they can make changes to get back to being good again. And hopefully, they make those changes and they look internally and they think critically and decide that, hey, look, this is what we need to do, and they do it. So that has been it for me here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Podcast Network. I've been Chris Blades. I want to thank you for listening to this episode for me. I hope you tune in again next time. While you're here, I also want to take the time again to remind you to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode. Give us a like. Give us a rating. Give us a review if you like what you hear today. Just because, again, that'll help me get better. That'll help the podcast get better. We can continue to bring out the great content that we want to give to you guys, and the more you interact with us, the better it'll be. And then, speaking of interactions, make sure you follow us on all social media pages: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Tweet us, ask us questions, ask us about the podcast, ask us about, talk about what you heard here today. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, all that fun stuff. We'll be more than willing to listen to what you guys have to say. So, I want to thank you guys. That has been my time. Peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.